Hello everybody and welcome to another edition of Safe Communities. I'm Plymouth County Sheriff Joe McDonald, and I am joined today by my friend and colleague Brian Gillen, who is the superintendent of the Plymouth County Correctional Facility and our longest standing employee. Been there since 1978. Worked his way up starting as a corrections officer back in 1978 and finds himself the last few years as superintendent, actually running the entire correctional facility and doing a great job, making my job as sheriff that much easier. I really appreciate the work that you do down there, Brian, and the staff that you've compiled down there. It's really a credit to the facility.
Thank you, Sheriff.
One of the things that we wanted to talk about today, and I'm glad that Brian is here to assist me with this, is the history of the Office of Sheriff in general and the Plymouth County Sheriff's Office in particular. And I'll talk a little bit about sheriffs in general, the Office of Sheriff, and then Brian and I will discuss many of the aspects in particular of how it pertains and how it's developed here in Plymouth County, because we really are unique, not just within Massachusetts, but within the country. You know, as a region, we're unique as far as what sheriffs do. The Office of Sheriff, people have a lot of preconceptions, ideas as to where the office started, and I'm a big fan of Western films, and I think many people are. And you think of the sheriff and the big shootout in the middle of the Western town, and those are that's an accurate depiction of how things were in the Wild West. But I think we need to go back further, and I'm not talking just to colonial America because there were sheriffs there as well. But going further back to medieval England, and during the reign of Alfred the Great, during the 1st century, there are those who say that the Office of Sheriff dates back actually even earlier than that to the reign of when the Romans controlled Great Britain. But when you think about it, here in the East Coast, here in Plymouth County in particular, our history is so rich with the Pilgrims coming in 1620. And I frequently like to talk to my colleagues from the South who like to say that, America started in Jamestown, Virginia in 1607, or Roanoke in perhaps 1597. And none of those things I agree with. Really, when you think about it, Jamestown and the Virginia colony was started as a commercial venture. And when you think about why it is that the Pilgrims came to these shores, they came not to make money. It was not a business venture. They came to start a new life. They came to create a society. And that is where, in my humble opinion, the United States actually began. So we look to English common law. And going back, as I said, to the 1st century with Alfred the Great, England was divided, and the king divided his realm into something known as shires. And the shires, and we even see this today with businesses that are located in Plymouth, that shire town. And a shire town back in medieval England would have been a town where a seat of government existed. Same here in the United States. The shire was what would eventually become known as the county later on. But the king appointed his royal representative within the shire, who was known as the reeve. He was the royal representative, and he carried out the will and the duties of the king within the shire. And it's interesting to note because back at that time, the business of the king was, not just to enforce the king's order, but also to maintain order and law enforcement, to head up local military forces, to collect taxes, to settle disputes. So the sheriff's power actually extended to things of a judicial nature. All of the powers that you would associate with the monarch would be exercised locally through the sheriff. And it's interesting to note that, as it's come down through time, many of those powers still, at common law, do exist within the office of the sheriff. People don't necessarily think about it, but the posse comitatus, the power of the county, the ability to deputize people, the ability to call out the militia, these are all things that the sheriff still does. Luckily, we don't have to collect taxes any longer or do things like that. But it is interesting to note that as the reeve of the shire is how the sheriff was born in medieval England. And over time, shire reeve became sheriff. It's a significant history, something that people may not be aware of or think about, but it's interesting to note that in 1215 AD, when the English nobles made King John sign off on the Magna Carta, a significant number, 27 of 63 articles of the Magna Carta, dealt with the powers of the sheriff and how to limit the powers of the sheriff. So we do know that the sheriffs existed in medieval England. And in fact, in popular culture, if people are familiar with the Robin Hood films, the Sheriff of Nottingham is prominently featured, not in a great light, but he is there. And I actually would note for the viewers that several years ago, 2 years ago, we did have an opportunity to actually meet the Sheriff of Nottingham, the current Sheriff of Nottingham. He still does exist, although it's a largely ceremonial position, but it was great to meet him and talk about the history of the office of sheriff. Here in Plymouth County, however, coming forward, the Plymouth colony in 1620, the first thing that the Pilgrims did was come up with the Mayflower Compact to self-govern, and that document didn't mention sheriffs. However, there was an individual who did play a role as a sheriff, or what would later become the sheriff. That was Captain Miles Standish. Captain Standish was, he was not a pilgrim, not one of the saints as they call themselves, was a stranger. He was a military man by profession, and his job was to maintain the safety and security externally, to protect the settlers, the pilgrims, and to maintain order within the community that they were establishing. So I would, I guess, look to Miles Standish, Captain Miles Standish, as the professional ancestor in the United States of the office of sheriff. It's also interesting to note that here in Plymouth County, the office of sheriff was actually formalized in 1692, and that was by royal appointment at that time. John Bradford was installed as the first sheriff of Plymouth County by the King of England, and that is how it remained. It was a royal appointment until American independence in 1776 changed the way that the sheriff was no longer a royal appointment, but was an appointment by the governor. So it still existed in that form. Remained largely unchanged in local government. The office of sheriff was formally recognized in Article 9 of the Constitution of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts of 1780, which we're also and should be very proud of the Constitution of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, because it is the oldest continuously operating governing document. It is older by 7 years than the federal Constitution. I had really was the model for the federal Constitution. The Bill of Rights that accompanies the federal Constitution mirrored the Constitution of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. So it's interesting to note that it goes back to English common law and formalized in our own Constitution. And it was later that this appointment went from an appointed position, as it had been in English common law, medieval England, and then colonial times. But in Article 19 of the Articles of Amendment of 1855, the office of sheriff became elective. And since that time, since 1855, we have been electing our sheriffs. I'm number 30 in that list. That goes all the way back to 1692. It's an interesting progression that between 1692 and the present time, we've had only 30 sheriffs. And of those sheriffs, you've had the pleasure of working with how many of them, Brian?
6.
6 sheriffs, wow. So you've been there since 1978, and you have seen tremendous change during that time.
Yes, I have.
And how have things changed?
Well, I think, going back to the old facility, which I started in 1978, it was an old linear style line of cell tier system. And in that facility, we really, I guess you could say, we were very reactive to everything that went on. Mm-hmm. Whereas now, in the corrections today, we pride ourselves in being proactive. Mm-hmm.
Now, you note the old facility, you're talking about the jail that was constructed at the turn of the last century?
1910.
1910, and that was located over in Obery Street.
Obery Street, correct.
Yeah, where the farm is located today.
That's right.
Yeah, and if you could explain for the viewers what is meant by the linear system of corrections, and contrast it with the more modern, what the modern system is now.
Well, the linear style was a remote style where you really were not in with the inmates. You more or less, the inmates, I hate to say this, they had much more control than they have now. The staff had many duties. They were not supervising the inmates in the housing units. They were taking care of other duties. They were covering other things, doing searches, covering chow halls, recreation, visits. But now we have the officer living right in, or not living, but in the housing unit where the inmates live, and the officer is in charge of everything in the housing unit. He does not leave. He's fixed.
Yeah.
Whereas before, they would leave.
Yeah, so the paradigm really has changed within corrections since you've been working in it.
Yes, it has.
Yeah.
And it really shifted over in the late 80s. We started looking at direct supervision, we started looking at unit management, and that's what we utilize now in the new facility.
Very good. Well, we're going to take a break, and we will be back right afterwards. Hello, I'm Plymouth County Sheriff Joe McDonald. Are You OK is a telephone calling system that checks on the well-being of Plymouth County senior citizens every day and can provide help when you need it. The service is entirely free with no equipment to buy. Are You OK provides daily, reliable telephone contact that will allow for the comfort and security you need to maintain your independence. Just call our toll-free number or contact your local police, senior service agency, or veterans agent. There is absolutely no cost to sign up, and your privacy and your number will be protected. We want you and your family to enjoy life, and especially let us know that you are okay. Hi, we're back, Safe Communities, with Superintendent Brian Gillen, my friend and colleague at the Plymouth County Sheriff's Office, the man responsible for the day-to-day operations of one of the largest correctional facilities, not just in the Northeast, but in the United States. We were talking before the break about how things have changed from the old linear system of supervision to the more modern direct supervision, and you were describing a little bit for the viewers how things have changed for the better in corrections.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Could you describe, how is it now that our corrections officers supervise those inmates as opposed to before?
Well, I think the biggest difference is the training that we provide and the supervision as well. But I think the training has a lot to do with it. Our staff today are much more highly trained than we were. I can tell you a story. When I started in 1978, my initial training consisted of going with the senior officer and shadowing him for a period of time. We do that today, but only after the correction officers go to a full academy. I eventually went to an academy down the road, but we didn't start that way. We started with the most veteran officer, and we just followed him throughout through the facility.
So you really had to learn on the job how it went?
Right, and we didn't have post orders, we didn't have procedures as we do now. Everything is written down. There's a template or a guide for everybody now, what to do, when to do it, how to do it. But back then in the 70s and early 80s, we really didn't have that.
Well, that's thanks to the veterans like you, Brian, that lived through those situations, that were able to memorialize what it was that needed to be done when something bad happens. It's a tribute to you and to the guys that work there and the women that work there. I say all the time, and I know you would echo the sentiment, that we're really very proud of the correctional staff that we have at Plymouth County. They're very highly trained. And one of the things that I always tell people, they have a tendency to refer to these individuals as guards. That nobody is guarding anything there. They are certainly officers, very highly trained, as you say. And they walk what is, and I know you can say that because you've been there, the toughest beat in law enforcement. There's no question. I say at graduations, and I want the viewers to realize and think about this, that when you're a police officer, 98% of the people that you're going to deal with on a daily basis are good, law-abiding people, just like you. But when you are a corrections officer, 100% of the people that you deal with come out of that other 2%. You need to remember that. It's a very dangerous environment, but one that I think that we're very careful as to who we select, and we train them very, very well.
Years ago, you could get away with hiring somebody to be a guard, as you refer to. They really didn't have a lot of interaction, a lot of communication with the inmate population. Now it's much different.
Yeah.
We have to hire people that are that can communicate well, that can deal with people, that can set limits, can de-escalate, situations. As I said, we try to be proactive now, and that all dovetails into all the training and how we want our staff to operate, to run a correctional facility. They are essentially running a jail within a jail in their own housing unit.
Yeah.
So therefore, we really, require our staff to be good communicators.
Yeah.
That's probably the most important thing.
Well, that's good. I think, one of the things that people ask me as I travel around, what does it actually look like physically within the jail? I mean, people have preconceptions of what, jail looks like from movies and things like that. And, some of these, that's all the old linear stuff, all the old movies that people, and some of it even earlier than that. But I think a lot of the, like the reality shows that people see, would you describe for the viewers what a typical housing unit looks like and how many inmates to officers we've got?
We'll have, our smallest unit is 60 inmates to one officer. That's a dormitory style where the inmates live in double bunks. And then we have a 4 or 5 man room housing unit. And we'll have one officer supervising 60 inmates as well. And then we'll go to our bigger units, which house 139 inmates, and we'll have 2 officers supervising them. The rooms would be double bunked. There'd be two people to a bunk, and it's 2 levels. You'd have a main level, then you have a mezzanine level with rooms stacked on top of each other, and also we'd have a recreation area inside the housing unit, as well as just outside we'll have a small ball yard, and we'll also have visitation and program areas right in the housing unit.
It's nice. So the idea, how things have changed historically seems to be, if you watch, the movies and things that, the riot that breaks out in the Chow Hall and things like that, we really don't have those types of things because it appears as though the paradigm shift, the philosophy now is to deliver everything you can within the units so people aren't moving around within the correctional facility, right?
Back in the 70s and the 80s, we centralized everything. The inmate population went to Chow together. They went to recreation together. When we built a new facility, we used a decentralized philosophy where we bring as much to the housing unit as we can. And the largest number of people that will be together are 139 inmates, whereas before, you would have almost virtually the whole population in a ball yard. So we learned that when we had problems, they were always in the ball yard or the Chow Hall. Now it's a much more safer way to run a facility.
Certainly, one of the things that visitors will say to me when they leave is how controlled everything is. Really, the environment is a much more controlled environment, and people feel safe. Yeah, but it's interesting to know you talk about the new facility, and even the new facility is getting on in years. You guys opened that in 1994?
Correct. Yep.
And that was something that was quite a project, I betcha.
Well, we had a lot of staff. It was funny when we started our training for our staff to use the new facility. We had people that actually did not want to leave the old facility and work in the new facility because they were, concerned. I think they were more, unsure of the future, and they weren't sure they were going to buy into this direct supervision, this unit management. But I think a lot of the people that I've talked to after we occupied the new facility that had that attitude changed. They were glad that we moved to the new facility. Yeah. Yeah. It's a safer, it's a cleaner, it's a more secure environment for the staff and the inmates.
Yeah, and it's interesting to note a story that you had told me. There was only one individual that didn't want to move when you guys did the move back in '94?
That's correct.
And that was an inmate that you picked up and carried over to the...
We did, and it was funny when the old facility, inmates were allowed to smoke. We eventually, disallowed smoking, but some of the inmates that were moving over were unhappy that we're moving to a smoke-free environment, and we anticipated that we're going to have a lot of trouble with the population. So I had a lot of people on standby to if we had to move somebody, and we only had one incident, and it was a very minor one.
Wow.
And we just carried them
Out of
to
how many
the
inmates
vehicle.
at that time?
At that time, I think our population was about 550.
Yeah. And how does that population number compare to today?
Today, we're running just under 1,400. We've been as high as 1,700 over the years. That's our highest population that we could house in the facility. But right now, just under 1,400 is a pretty significant number.
Yeah. And the other nice thing about the new facility as opposed to the old was your ability to take in some of the inmates on behalf of other agencies at the state level, at the federal level. Could you speak a little bit about that?
Yeah, we're pretty unique. We house a lot of different jurisdictions there. We have obviously our sentence population and our trial population. We have state prison inmates. We also have U.S. Marshal detainees. We have ICE detainees. We had juveniles. We no longer do, but we had them for a long period of time. So it was a pretty unique facility with many, many different jurisdictions.
Yeah, and that was one of the things that really set, I think, our agency apart, is the partnerships that we had forged over the years. And not just, little to do with me, because I wasn't the sheriff at that time. You were there, so I think you can credit yourself with having set some of those up. But, hearkening back to Sheriff Flynn, when Peter Flynn was there, the sheriff who actually built the facility, those relationships, I think, stand us in good, even today, stand us in good stead with Immigration and Customs and the Marshal's Office, and the relationships that you've maintained with Department of Corrections. Those are crucially important to running any facility of any size. And it's nice because we're able to, as a county facility, and now we're a state agency, but we're able to offer what services we can offer, not just to our local communities, but to those state agencies and federal agencies as well.
Absolutely. There's a really nice network established, throughout the state with the different, sheriff's departments and with the Department of Correction, and we play a big part in that.
Yeah. And it's interesting to note, another kudo to you and to the staff there, and this is always commented on when I'm traveling around, is the fact that when there is a high-profile inmate that is a fugitive who's been apprehended internationally or locally, or nationally for that matter, there really is never a question as to where they're going. They're coming to the Plymouth County Correctional Facility, and that's a testament to you and to the staff down there. I tell people you guys are the best in the business, but I'll throw it at you. What is it that makes you guys the best in the business?
I think it's the staff. I think it's, as I said earlier, I think our training is very good, but I think we have a lot of very hardworking, dedicated, professional people that really care about what they do, and that's reflected in how we run the facility. And therefore, when the marshals call, when ICE calls, when the DOC calls, they do not hesitate to send high-profile inmates to us.
Yeah, that's so true.
It's because of our staff.
Yeah, and I say that all the time as well, but that starts at the top, so that's a credit to you, Brian, having been there for as long as you've been there. But it's also interesting to note that I hear really that same sentiment expressed by people when they come to visit the facility, when they stop and they talk to our officers in the hallway, how committed those officers are to the job that they do and how knowledgeable they are and how engaged. Just that it's refreshing to know that we've got people who are in an environment that could really cause you to go stale very quickly, but these people somehow manage to keep it fresh and to keep themselves on the ball. That's something I think we should mention to the viewers, is the fact that we do have tours down there. We are very proud of our staff. We're very proud of the facility. And if there are people that want to come down, they can certainly contact us and we'll make arrangements. We do school groups. And what other group tours have you seen recently? We had some college and high school students come down.
Oh, we've had, college kids, high school kids. We've had, Boy Scouts. We've had just about every organization you can think of have come through the facility. We've had this program for quite a while, and it's very successful.
Oh, that's great.
It's well received in the community, and they like partaking.
Yeah, and I think it's good for our staff as well to know that people are interested in what they do. Okay.
And people are proud of what they do.
Yeah.
And that's evident. And I get a lot of feedback from a lot of the groups that come in.
Well, that's great. And we're very proud of our people, It's one thing that we share. Well, Brian, I want to thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedule to come down here and let people know, what it is, the history of the agency, and what it is we're up to. And we thank you, and I'm sure the viewers are interested in this, and hopefully we'll get a few to come down and actually check the place out. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sheriff.
Thank you.